He told her he could never love a woman like her. She smiled and told him the exact date he'd be at her feet. Cassandra Blair is 28. She's the driver for the Hahn family, and she is black. Her uniform is loose, off-white, plain. It hides everything about her. She keeps a small notebook nobody knows about, filled with the plates and times of a car that has followed her for weeks. Jun-Suk Han runs the Korean Mafia. They call him Snow Wolf. A black dragon climbs the right side of his neck, its head resting behind his ear. His watch is Swiss steel. His word ends careers. 2 days before the new year, she drives him and his mother from a meeting to the mansion. His mother speaks about her through the rearview mirror, says the cruel thing out loud, and to bury what he already feels, Jun-Suk says he would never fall for a woman like her. Cassandra parks the car. She turns, calm, and she tells him the day is coming when he'll be on his knees for her. Then comes the gala, a red silk dress she bought months ago, for herself, an order passed down to cover her curves with a shawl. She hands the shawl back and walks in anyway. He watches her come down the staircase and forgets every word he's supposed to say. But what she did after that night? Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Cassandra Blair ran her thumb along the seam of the tire and felt the crack before she saw it. Third bay, second car from the left, the black sedan they used for the family's short runs. She crouched lower. The rubber had split near the inner wall, a hairline that would open under weight and speed and cold. 2 days from the new year. The garage had 40 vehicles to move that night, and this one was 2 hours from failing. She wrote it down. Bay 3, sedan, front left, replace before dusk. Her handwriting was small and even, the letters of a woman who had learned to make a note nobody else could read over her shoulder. The garage under the Hahn estate ran the length of a city block. Concrete floor, painted lines, the smell of oil and cold steel, and the faint sweetness of the wax the crew used on the show cars. Overhead, the fluorescents buzzed in a long white row. Somewhere far off, a compressor kicked on, ran, cut out. The gala was in 2 days, and the whole house above her had gone taut with it. Cassandra stood. Her knees ached from the concrete. The uniform hung off her the way she liked it. The off-white blouse loose at the shoulders, the black trousers straight and forgiving, the flat shoes silent. Nothing about the shape of her showed. That was the point. In this house, a driver who disappeared was a driver who kept her job. The only thing on her that caught the light was the small silver stud in her nose. Blair. Walter O.C. came down the ramp with his clipboard held against the shelf of his belly. The fleet uniform strained across him, the gray vest riding up, the ring of keys at his hip, swinging with each step. He had olieras dark as bruises, and a way of arriving out of breath. Mrs. Hahn wants the roster by 4. Every car, every route, every man. She'll have it. Every man, she said. Names. He tapped the clipboard. Not just cars. Names beside the cars. Cassandra looked at him. Since when does she want names? Walter's eyes went somewhere over her shoulder. Since this year. He scratched the gray stubble along his jaw, the little scar on his chin catching the light. Don't make it a thing. Just write who drives what. I always write who drives what. Then it's easy. He was already turning, already breathing hard from the turn. By 4. She watched him climb the ramp. The keys sang against his hip the whole way up until the door at the top swallowed him. For a moment, she stood with the pen in her hand and did not write. Names beside cars was not new. Names demanded by the matriarch, in writing, 2 days before the house filled with 300 strangers. That was new, and Cassandra had spent enough years reading the weather of powerful people to know when a small thing was not small. She filed it away and moved to the next bay. A younger driver was there already, one of the new ones the house had taken on for the season, a boy of maybe 20 with the sleeves of his uniform rolled to the elbow. He had the hood of the second sedan up and a rag in his hand and the confident slouch of someone who had never once been wrong. "It's fine," he said before she asked. "I checked it." "Checked what?" "All of it." He waved the rag at the engine. "It's fine." Cassandra set 2 fingers on the coolant reservoir. The line sat a full inch below the mark. She tapped the plastic where the level showed. The boy looked at it and then looked at her, and the confidence went out of his shoulders by a degree. "Fill it," she said, "then check the man beside you did his, because tonight, one of these cars carries a person whose death would end you, and it will not be the car that killed him. It will be the name in my ledger beside the car." She said it without heat. Heat was a luxury. "Fill it." He filled it. She watched him do it and said nothing more, and when he was done, he looked at her a second time, differently, the way the old drivers looked at her, and she felt the small, cold satisfaction of a lesson landing. She would not be here to teach him past January. Someone should. She moved on. Work steadied her. It always had. She checked fluid, checked pressure, checked the seat of every battery terminal with the back of 2 fingers. She logged what she found. The younger drivers thought her slow. The older ones had watched her catch a brake line last winter that would have put the youngest Han cousin through a guardrail, and they did not think her slow anymore. She worked the row until her hands were black, and her back had loosened, and the light through the high-slit windows had gone from white to gold. Then she came to the corner bay, the one nobody parked in, and she stopped. She crouched by the drain grate where the floor sloped, reached under the lip of the tool cabinet, past the coil of hose, to the flat tin she had wedged there weeks ago. Inside the tin, wrapped in a rag, was a small notebook with a black cover. She did not take it out into the light. She turned so her back filled the gap between the cabinet and the wall, and she opened it on her knee. 12 entries, each one a date, a time, a place, and a plate. A gray car. She had first seen it on a Tuesday, parked across from the pharmacy where she filled her mother's prescriptions. Engine running, nobody getting out. She had noticed it because a running engine wasted fuel, and Cassandra noticed waste. Then she saw it Thursday outside the laundromat. Then, the following Monday, 2 streets from her apartment, and that was when she stopped calling it nothing. She had memorized the plate before she ever wrote it down. Then she wrote it down, because a memory could be argued with and a page could not. 12 times in 6 weeks. Different streets, same car. It never followed her into the estate. It waited at the edges of her private life, at the places that had nothing to do with the Han family, and that was the part that kept her awake. Whoever sat behind that windshield was not watching the driver. They were watching the woman. She had tested it once. 2 weeks ago, she had changed her route home for no reason, gone 3 stops past her own, doubled back on foot through a market where cars could not follow. The gray car had been waiting at her corner when she came out the other side, patient as a landlord. That was the day she stopped telling herself it might be nothing. Nothing did not double back. Nothing did not wait. She had considered every explanation a careful woman considers. A jealous man, there was none. A debt, she owed no one. Owing was the thing she had built her whole adult life around never doing. A mistake, some other black woman on some other errand. But the plate was the plate, 12 times, and mistakes did not repeat themselves with that kind of discipline. What was left was the explanation she liked least. Someone had chosen her, someone with money enough to burn a tank of fuel a week sitting still. And the only people she knew with that kind of money lived above her head, in the house with the chandeliers, and had just, this week, begun demanding the names of everyone who touched their cars. She read the last entry twice. Friday, the corner by her building, 6:40 in the evening. She had walked past close enough to see there were two of them inside and that neither one turned his head, which was worse than if they had. Cassandra closed the notebook, wrapped it, set it in the tin under the lip of the cabinet, the hose coiled back over it. She stayed crouched a moment with her hand flat on the cold floor. She had told no one. Not the security men, who answered to the house. Not Walter, who answered to whoever paid last. Not her mother, who would pray and worry and change nothing. There was no one in this world whose worry would make her safer, and there was every chance that saying the words out loud in this house would turn a private problem into a Han problem, and Cassandra had learned young that becoming a rich family's problem was not the same as being helped by one. She would handle it herself. She had a plan for handling it. The plan had a date, and the date was January. Her mother would have said to trust someone. Her mother trusted everyone, which was how her mother had spent 30 years cleaning other people's floors and come out the far end with a bad hip and a shelf of church programs and no savings anyone could point to. Cassandra loved her the way you love a lesson you paid for in full. She called her every night from the payphone. Last night her mother had asked, again, why she stayed with those people, and Cassandra had said, again, the money, and her mother had gone quiet in the way that meant she knew there was more and had decided not to reach for it. There was more. The more was folded in a locker and sketched on a receipt and written in a black notebook, and none of it was a thing you told a woman who prayed over a bad hip and worried herself sick. She stood, wiped her hand on her thigh, and went back to the fleet. At the workbench, she pulled the ledger and began the roster Mrs. Hahn had demanded. Bay 1, the Maybach herself. Bay 2, the second sedan, Park's nephew. Bay 3, replace tire, then herself again for the primary run. She wrote each name in full and each route in the shorthand only she used, and beside the last column she left a space, because the last column was the one that decided which driver carried which member of the family, and the head of security had not yet told her who rode where on gala night. She was halfway down the page when her own future rose up in front of her, uninvited, the way it did a dozen times a day now. In January, she would give her notice. She had run the numbers so many times, the numbers had stopped being numbers and become a kind of prayer. 2 vans to start. One she would drive, one she would hire out. A contract with the medical courier company that had already, twice, told her they liked how she moved. A woman she knew from church, who wanted the books kept honest and would keep them for a share. Cassandra had a name for the company chosen and unspoken. She had a logo sketched on the back of a receipt in her wallet, 3 lines and a road, nothing anyone would frame, everything she needed. She had saved for 4 years. She had eaten standing up over the sink for 4 years. She had let the house think she was grateful for 4 years, and gratitude was a costume that had cost her more than any of them would ever know. 40 more days. She could wear the costume 40 more days. "You're smiling," said Park Yun-ja from the top of the ramp. Cassandra had not heard the housekeeper come down. Mrs. Park moved like weather, soft and total. She came the rest of the way holding a thermos in both hands, the reading glasses on their cord bouncing against her apron, the ring of keys at her waist smaller and quieter than Walter's. "I was thinking about something good," Cassandra said. "Good is rare in this house this week. Man," Mrs. Park set the thermos on the bench. "Tea, the smell of it, ginger, and something darker. Drink. You've been down here since before I lit the kitchen. I ate." "You didn't." Mrs. Park unscrewed the cup that was also the lid and poured without being told. "You inspect the cars like they're your children, and you feed yourself like an enemy. Drink." Cassandra drank. The tea went down warm, and she felt how cold she had been. Over the rim, she watched the older woman's face, the way it stayed pleasant while the eyes did their real work. moving over the roster, the ledger, the space in the last column. She asked for names, Mrs. Park said. Not a question. By 4. The housekeeper folded her hands over her apron. 22 years I've kept this house. I've never once been asked, who cleans against which wall? She let that sit. This year, she wants a map of the servants. You think it means something? I think a woman who has never wondered where I stand does not begin to wonder for no reason. Mrs. Park picked up the thermos and did not leave. Finish the tea, bring the cup up when you come, and Cassandra. The use of the first name was rare enough that Cassandra looked up. Whatever you're planning for the winter, a pause. Plan it quietly. She went up the ramp before Cassandra could arrange her face, the keys at her waist barely making a sound, and left the question of how much she knew hanging in the oiled air. Cassandra set the cup down slowly. She had been careful. She had been careful the way other people were religious, every day, without exception, without applause. She had said the name of her company to no one. She had made her calls from the payphone by the pharmacy because she did not trust the estate lines, and still, the oldest woman in the house had looked at her across a workbench and known there was a winter coming that had nothing to do with the Hans. Careful was not the same as invisible. She would have to be both. She finished the roster with the last column blank and carried it up herself. The service corridor behind the kitchen had become a river of people. Florists with buckets of white peonies, a man on a ladder threading lights through the stair rail, 2 caterers arguing in low, fast Korean about ice. The house above the garage was enormous, and tonight it felt small. Every hallway narrowed by boxes and crates, and the sharp electric tension of a family that entertained the way other families went to war. Cassandra kept to the wall. She had learned the geography of invisibility here, which corridors the family used and which they never saw, where to stand so a passing eye slid off her, how to carry paper so she looked like an errand and not a person. She delivered the roster to the security office, where the door was open and the head of security was not in it, and she left it in the tray marked for him, with a note that the last column waited on his word. She was turning to go back down when she heard the matriarch's voice. Mi-Suk-han came along the upper corridor with her secretary trailing a step behind, the jade ring flashing on her right hand as she gestured. She wore the pearl gray silk she favored for planning days, her gray hair drawn back so tight it lifted the corners of her eyes, her spine straight as a rule. She did not raise her voice. She had never, in Cassandra's 4 years, raised her voice. She lowered it, and the lowering was worse, because it made every person in earshot lean toward the blade. 300, Mi-Suk was saying. Every one of them will report what they saw in this house to someone. So they will see order. They will see a family that agrees with itself. She stopped. Her eyes found Cassandra against the wall and moved over her the way they might move over a stain on the runner, noting it, deciding whether it required action, deciding not yet. You, the driver. Ma'am. You have the New Year roster, with Mr. Han's security office. It waits on the seating. It waits on nothing. Mi-Suk's voice did not rise. My son rides with me. I ride first. You will drive. A beat. You have driven me before. Yes, ma'am. You do not talk. It was the highest compliment the woman knew how to give, and she gave it like an instruction. Good. She was already moving on, the jade ring catching the light, the secretary hurrying to keep the pace. Fix the last line. My son and I, first car, you, done. And she was gone around the corner, leaving the corridor to exhale. Cassandra stood a moment with her back to the wall. First car. The matriarch and the heir, together, and her hands on the wheel. She had driven each of them 100 times. She had never driven them at the same time, and the roster in the tray had suddenly become a different document, one that put her alone in a moving box with the two people who ran everything, on the night the house filled with strangers. She thought of the gray car at the edge of her life. She thought of names beside cars, demanded in writing, 2 days out. She thought of Mrs. Park saying, "Plan it quietly." Too many small things. She did not believe in coincidence the way she did not believe in luck, as a comfort other people could afford. She went back down to the garage the long way, through the service stair, past the laundry where steam fogged the little window, past the boot room, down into the cold. The compressor was silent now. The gold light through the high windows had gone to gray. She turned on the bench lamp and its small circle held back the dark of the long bays. She opened her wallet. Behind the folded bills, behind the churchwoman's number and the courier company's card, was the receipt with the logo sketched on the back. 3 lines and a road. She looked at it the way another woman might look at a photograph of someone she loved, and was not sure she would see again. Then she put it away. There was one more thing she did in the garage that day. The thing she did not tell herself was a ritual though it was. At the back of her own locker, under the spare uniform, folded in tissue and a plastic sleeve, was a dress. Red. Not the red of warning lights or the red of the Han family crest. A deep, arterial red, silk, cut close. She had bought it 4 months ago from a shop that did not know her, paid cash, carried it home in a bag she folded flat and hid. She had never worn it. She had tried it on once, in her bathroom with the door locked, and had stood in front of the mirror not recognizing the woman looking back, the one with the small waist and the wide hips and the long fall of honey-lit hair, the one the uniform erased every single day. She had bought it for no occasion. That was the truth she kept even from herself. She had bought it because a woman who spends 4 years being invisible needs one object in the world that proves she chose it. The dress was not for anyone. The dress was a receipt, like the logo, proof that Cassandra Blair existed outside the shape this house allowed her. She had carried it to work today. That was the part she would not examine. It had lived in her apartment closet for 4 months, and this morning, without deciding to, she had folded it into the plastic sleeve and brought it to the estate and put it in the back of her locker under the spare uniform. She told herself it was safer here, though it was not. She told herself the closet at home had damp, though it did not. The truth sat lower than any reason she was willing to give it. The house was full of people preparing to be seen. And some part of her, the part that had counted 4 years and 40 days, was tired to the bone of being the one person in it built to be looked through. She touched the plastic sleeve through the gap in the folded uniform, did not take it out, just touched it, the way you touch a door to know it's still there, and closed the locker. Then she washed the oil from her hands at the deep sink, scrubbing past her wrists, watching the black run gray and then clear, and she dried them on the rough towel and looked at her reflection warped in the steel of the paper dispenser, the loose blouse, the flat shoes, the silver stud, nothing else. 40 days of this face. She could do 40 days of this face. Above her, the house made its enormous noise. 300 chandeliers of it, a family arranging itself into the shape of agreement for the eyes of the world. Down here, it was quiet and cold, and hers. She was checking the fuel log one last time when the door at the top of the ramp opened, and a man she did not know stood in the light of it, and did not come down, and did not speak, and simply looked at the row of cars, and then at her, and then closed the door again. Cassandra stood very still. She counted. 10 seconds. 20. The door stayed shut. He had worn a dark coat and dress shoes, not a uniform, not the soft-soled black the security men favored on a work floor. He had not carried a clipboard, or keys, or any of the small props a person uses to belong somewhere. He had stood in a doorway above a garage full of a family's cars and taken inventory of the room and of her, and then he had gone, and men who belonged did not need to leave the moment they were seen. She looked at the ramp a long moment, then at the corner bay, where the tin sat under the lip of the cabinet with 12 dates in it. She did not go to it. Going to it now would be the same as pointing at it, and she had no way of knowing whether the door at the top had a second eye behind it. She had spent 6 weeks riding down a gray car because a running engine had told her something was wrong. She trusted that instinct more than she trusted most people, and every instinct she owned was standing up now, in the cold under the great humming house, telling her that whatever had begun at the edges of her life had just, for the first time, walked to the top of her stairs. She wrote the time down. Old habit. The truest one she had. Beside it she wrote 3 words: man, door, coat, and nothing else, because nothing else was fact yet, and she had learned the hard way to write only what she could swear to. Then she picked up the roster, because the roster was due, and because a woman who wanted to survive 40 more days in this house did her job while the ground moved, and she carried it up into the light. The meeting ran long, and Cassandra was already behind the wheel of the first car when the 2 of them came down the marble steps toward her. She had the engine warm, the heater set low, the rear doors unlocked in the order they always used, mother first, son second. She watched them in the side mirror. Mi-suk moved like someone who had never once wondered whether a door would open for her. Behind her, a half step back, came the man in the black suit, buttoning his coat against the cold. Cassandra did not turn around. She kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes forward, the way she had been taught, the way the house preferred, the way that had kept her invisible for 4 years. Han Deok-soo held the rear door. Mi-suk slid in behind the driver's seat. Jun-suk took the far side. The door shut with the soft, expensive sound the whole estate seemed built to make. "The gate on 5th, Mi-suk said, not to Cassandra, to the air, the way she gave all her instructions. Not the tunnel, I want to see the lights." Cassandra pulled out. Gravel, then smooth asphalt, then the long private road that fed onto the avenue. 30 minutes back to the mansion if the traffic behaved. She kept it at an even speed and let the silence sit, because the silence was the job. For the first 10 minutes nobody spoke. Jun-suk worked on his phone. Mi-suk watched the city assemble itself in the glass. Cassandra drove, and in the rearview mirror she could see the top third of the older woman's face. The severe eyes, the finely lined mouth, the gray hair pulled into its low, flawless knot. The heater ticked. Somewhere in the dash, a fan changed pitch. Cassandra had driven this exact route perhaps 200 times, and she knew it the way she knew the sound of her own key in her own door. The long private road, the merge, the 4 lights before the bridge, the way the third one liked to turn amber if you took it above 30. She drove it now on that muscle memory and left the rest of her free to listen, because listening was the other half of the job, the half nobody wrote down. Mi-suk's phone lit in her lap. She glanced at it and turned it face down without answering. "That, too," Cassandra filed. The older woman answered every call except the ones she was afraid of. And tonight, there was one she was afraid of. Then Mi-suk said, "You embarrassed me tonight." Jun-suk did not look up. The Seo family understood. The Seo family understood that my son sat through dinner with their daughter and said 40 words. Her voice stayed low and level. That was the frightening thing about it. Yuna is patient. Her father is not. Then let her father be impatient. "You will marry her before spring." The words landed flat in the small space. Cassandra felt them the way you feel a change in air pressure. She kept her foot steady on the accelerator and her eyes on the road, and she made herself into furniture, the way she knew how. Jun-suk set the phone face down on his knee. "I have said no." You have said no to me. You have not said no to the arrangement. There is a difference, and you know it. There isn't. The families have spoken. The date is a formality. Mi-suk turned her head toward her son for the first time. You will stand next to that girl at the gala, and you will let people assume. That is all I ask this week. Assume. I won't. Cassandra took the turn onto Fifth. The lights came up on both sides, gold and red strung between the buildings, and Mi-suk watched them for a moment, as if the argument had never happened. Then she spoke again, and her voice had gone somewhere colder. You are 36. You run everything your father built, and half of what he didn't live to build, and you cannot give me one grandson with the right blood. The right blood? Jun-suk's mouth moved into something that was not a smile. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. Your father built this from a fish market and 2 loans he never paid back, Mi-suk said. He built it so that our name would outlast us. A name is not a name if it stops. You understand that better than anyone alive, and still you make me beg. I'm not making you beg. I'm telling you no. No is a word for children. Then I'm a child. He said it without heat, which was worse than heat. Marry Yuna yourself, if the blood matters so much. She's closer to your age than mine in every way that counts. The jade ring came down against the armrest, one sharp tap. It was the only crack in the older woman's composure all night, and it was gone as fast as it came. The car went quiet again. Cassandra changed lanes to get around a delivery truck, checked her mirror, and for a half-second her eyes met the road behind them, and she thought, without wanting to, of a gray sedan, of 12 entries in a black notebook, of a corner at 6:40 on a Friday, with 2 men sitting inside. She pushed it down. Not here. Not tonight. She had a plan for that, and the plan did not involve this car. Mi-suk shifted in her seat. When she spoke, she pitched her voice differently, lighter, almost conversational, and Cassandra understood, a beat too late, that she was now part of the conversation. At least the girl is one of us, Mi-suk said. You spend your life around the other kind. Drivers, cleaners, girls who wash the cars and pour the drinks. A small pause. In the mirror, the older woman's eyes flicked forward, to the back of Cassandra's head, to the long braid of honey gold hair, to the shoulders held straight in the loose off-white uniform. You start to forget what a wife is supposed to look like. Cassandra did not move. Her hands stayed at 10 and 2. Her expression, in the sliver of mirror, gave nothing. Mother, Jun-suk's voice had an edge now. I'm only saying you've grown too comfortable. A man surrounds himself with a certain type long enough, he stops seeing them properly. That is how mistakes happen. Mi-suk let the sentence settle. Then, almost idly, to the mirror. Isn't that right? You've been with us how long now? The question was a trap, and everyone in the car knew it. If Cassandra answered warmly, she was forward. If she answered coldly, she was insolent. If she said nothing, she was sullen. Cassandra let a breath pass. She had learned that a half-second of nothing read as respect, and respect was the cheapest coin she had to spend in this house, so she spent it freely. 4 years, ma'am, she said, even, pleasant, nothing underneath it that could be grabbed. 4 years, Mi-suk smiled without warmth, and she still knows her place. You see, that is the difference. That is all I want from you, people who know their place. Cassandra watched the road. In the mirror, she could see the man now, too. Jun-suk had turned slightly, his jaw set, his dark eyes moving from his mother to the rear view and, for just a moment, to Cassandra's reflected face. Their eyes touched in the glass. He looked away first. Say something, Mi-suk told him. There's nothing to say. There is. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you could look at a woman like that. She did not gesture, she did not need to, and feel anything a man builds a family on. Tell me, and I'll drop the CO girl tonight. It was meant as a checkmate. Cassandra understood the shape of it. The mother had cornered the son with an impossible thing, so that his only exit was to agree, and agreeing would end the discussion, and ending the discussion was all Misuk had ever wanted. Cassandra kept driving. She counted the blocks the way she counted everything, steady, private, a way of holding still inside a moving thing. Junsuk looked out his window. When he spoke, his voice was flat and quiet, and it filled the car more completely than his mother's ever had. I would never fall for a woman like that. He chose each word the way a man lays down cards he is not sure of. Cassandra heard the choosing. She had spent 4 years learning the difference between a sentence a man believes and a sentence a man performs, and this one had the seams of a performance. Too clean, too final, aimed less at her than at the woman beside him who had demanded it. He was paying a toll. He was paying it with her. Cassandra's hands did not tighten. That was a thing she would think about later. How they did not tighten. How nothing in her body betrayed her. How 4 years of being furniture had trained the tremor out of her. She took the next light on the yellow. The city slid by, gold and red. There, Misuk said, satisfied. Was that so hard? She reached forward and patted the back of the passenger seat once, near Cassandra's shoulder, not touching her, patting the leather beside her, the way a person praises a dog they will not lower themselves to pet. You see how simple, a little honesty, and the whole thing settles. Cassandra watched the drive unspool in the headlights. She said nothing, but she memorized the pat, the way she memorized license plates, the way she memorized the hour a gray car waited on a Friday corner. She had a place inside her where she kept the things done to her, and it was very orderly, and it was very full, and tonight it had gained one more. Are we finished? We're finished. The older woman settled back. You'll dance with Yuna at least once. For the photographs. Junsuk did not answer. He picked his phone back up, but he did not look at it. He looked at the window, at the smeared lights, and something in his reflection had gone very still. Cassandra drove. The words sat in her chest where she had put them, folded small, the way she folded everything she could not use yet. She thought about the vestido in her locker, the red silk she had bought 4 months ago, with cash for no one but herself. She thought about the recibo in her wallet, with 3 lines and a road drawn on it. She thought about 40 days. She thought, a man like that, a woman like that. And she let the thought pass through her without leaving a mark, because a mark was a thing they could see, and she gave them nothing they could see. They crossed the bridge. The tires changed their song on the joints of it, a low double knock every few seconds, and beneath that rhythm, Cassandra let herself do the arithmetic she never let anyone see. What a sentence like the one forming in her chest would cost, what it would buy, whether a woman with 38 days left and 4 years saved could afford to spend her silence tonight, of all nights, in front of these 2 people, in this car. The mansion's district began. Wider streets, higher walls, fewer people. 10 minutes now. She could have said nothing. That was the trained thing, the safe thing, the thing that got a woman to 40 days. She had said nothing to worse. She had poured drinks for men who talked about her as if she were a lamp, and she had smiled and refilled the glass and gone home and called her mother from the pharmacy phone. Silence was a skill she had spent 4 years sharpening, and tonight, silence would cost her nothing. But she had bought a red dress with her own money and hidden it in a locker in a house that wanted her invisible, and some part of her had bought it for exactly this, for the day she stopped being furniture. Maybe not out loud, maybe just to herself, but she had bought it. So when she brought the car to the private gate, and the guard raised the barrier, and she rolled through into the long drive, and the mansion came up gold and enormous at the end of it, She did something she had never once done in 4 years. She spoke first. She kept her voice low. She kept it calm, calmer even than Misuk's, and that calmness was the whole weapon. She did not turn around. She spoke to the windshield, to the great lit house coming toward them, and she let both of them hear it. "One day," Cassandra said, "you'll be at my feet." The car seemed to change temperature. Misuk's head came up sharply. "What did you say?" Cassandra pulled smoothly to the base of the steps and set the brake. She did not repeat it. Repeating it would have made it a threat, and it was not a threat. It was a forecast, delivered by a woman who had been watching this family longer and more carefully than any of them had ever watched her. "Stop the car," Misuk said, though the car had already stopped. "Do you have any idea? Do you understand who you are speaking to?" "We've stopped, ma'am." Cassandra's tone was the same tone she used to say. 4 years. Perfectly even. Perfectly deferential on the surface, and underneath it, something that would not bend. Your home. For 1 full second, nobody moved. Han Deoksu appeared at the top of the steps and started down toward the door, and the ordinary machinery of the house began to close over the moment, like water over a stone. Then Jun-suk laughed. It was one short exhale, almost soundless, and it was not amusement. Cassandra heard it in the mirror, and she saw it. The corner of his mouth, the disbelief moving through his face, the recalculation. Men like him did not get spoken to, not by anyone, and least of all by the woman who drove the car. The whole architecture of his life was built so that no one would ever say a sentence like that to him. "What is your name?" he said. Not. "How dare you?" Not. "You're fired." Just the name, as if the name were suddenly a thing he needed. Cassandra met his eyes in the glass. "Blair, sir. Cassandra Blair." She gave it plainly, first and last, the way you hand over a thing you are not ashamed of. In 4 years, no one in this family had asked. She had worn a name tag on the uniform they issued her, and not one of them had ever read past the word. Driver. Now the man who ran the whole house wanted the syllables, and Cassandra found she was glad, in a hard and private way, to be the one to spell them out for him. His mother was still speaking, something about insolence, about the front office, about seeing to it personally that this was the last night, but Jun-suk was not listening to his mother anymore. He had taken his phone off his knee, and Cassandra, watching him in the mirror with the stillness she had made her whole disguise, saw his thumb move across the screen. He was typing. She could not see the words, but she could see the shape of the act, a man entering something he intended to keep. The date, perhaps. The hour. 6 words spoken from the driver's seat of a moving car by a woman he had just told his mother he could never want. She watched him save it, whatever it was, and put the phone away in the inside pocket of his coat, over the heart, in the pocket with no easy reach, the way she herself hid the things that mattered. Han Deoksu opened the rear door. Cold air came in. Misuk got out first. She was rigid with a fury she was too disciplined to fully release in front of the security chief, and she paused only long enough to lean back down toward the open door, her jade ring catching the light, and say into the car, "You will not be driving tomorrow. You will not be driving anything ever again." Then she went up the steps, spine straight, and the great door took her. Jun-suk did not get out. Cassandra sat with her hands on the wheel and waited, because it was not her place to speak twice, and she had already spoken once, and once was more than she had spent in 4 years. The engine idled, the heater breathed. Han Deoksu stood by the open door with the patience of a man who had learned not to hurry powerful people. Cassandra watched him in the mirror. She had expected him to follow his mother up the steps. That was what men in his position did. They let the machine of the house carry an insult away and dissolve it, They never sat in the wreckage of a small moment. And yet he sat. He had unbuttoned nothing, moved nothing. He simply had not left. "You've been here 4 years," Junsuk said finally. To the back of her head, "Yes, sir. And you chose tonight." Cassandra considered the windshield, the house, the 40 days she had left, which had probably just become fewer. "I chose tonight," she agreed. Why? She could have said many things. She could have said nothing, and let him fire her, and gone home to the plan she had built and saved 4 years for, and never seen any of these people again. That would have been the wise thing. The plan did not need this man. The plan did not need this house. But he had asked. Why? And there was something in the way he asked it, not the anger she had braced for, but a kind of hunger, the confusion of a man who has just felt the floor of his life shift a 1/4 inch and cannot find the crack. "Because you looked at me in the mirror," Cassandra said, before you told her you never would. The silence after that was a different silence than any that had filled the car all night. She did not turn around to see his face. She did not need to. She had watched enough men lose their footing to know the sound a room makes when a true thing is set down in it, the way the air goes flat and heavy, the way even the heater seems to lower its voice. Junsuk got out of the car. He stood for a moment on the gravel with the door open and the cold pouring in, and Cassandra watched him in the side mirror, the tall, straight figure, the black coat, the collar turned up against the night, the dark line of the tattoo just visible above it where the fabric didn't quite reach. He looked back at the car, at her. "Blair," he said, testing the name again, filing it. "Sir, you'll be here tomorrow." It was not a question, and it was not the dismissal his mother had promised. Cassandra understood, with the part of her that had survived 4 years by reading the weather in rooms she wasn't allowed to speak in, that she had just become a problem this man intended to keep in front of him, rather than send away. She did not know yet whether that was better or worse than being fired. She only knew it was different, and different was a country she had not planned to enter. "If I'm allowed to be, sir," she said. "You're allowed." He shut the door. Then, through the glass, in a voice she almost couldn't hear, "That's not up to her." He went up the steps. Han Deok-soo gave Cassandra a long, unreadable look, a man who had heard everything and would repeat none of it, and followed his employer into the house. Cassandra sat alone in the idling car at the foot of the great lit steps. Then her hands began to shake. She let them. There was no one to see now, and the tremor she had trained out of herself for the last 30 minutes came up all at once, from the wrists, and she gripped the wheel and let it move through her and out. Her breath fogged faint on the cold glass. Up at the top of the house a window was gold, a figure crossed it and was gone. Her mother's voice came to her, unbidden, the way it always did when her hands shook, the tired voice from the pharmacy phone, asking why she stayed with. That kind of people, asking it every night for 4 years, while Cassandra fed coins into the slot and said, "Soon, Mama, soon." Tonight she had an answer her mother would never fully understand. She had stayed long enough to learn exactly where the cracks in these people ran, and tonight she had put her thumb in one, gently, in front of a man who did not know yet that he had a crack at all. She had said the sentence. She had carried it 4 months in a red dress and 4 years in her spine, and she had finally, tonight, on a night she had not chosen so much as recognized, set it down in the open, where a powerful man had been forced to catch it. "One day you'll be at my feet." She did not know if it was true. She was not a woman who lied to herself about odds. She knew what she was, and what he was, and what the wall between them was made of. But she knew something else, too. Something she had watched happen in the mirror, while his mother congratulated herself. She had seen him type. She had seen him save it. Men did not archive words that meant nothing to them. Cassandra put the car in gear and drove it slow around the side of the house toward the garage ramp, past the caterers' vans and the strings of unlit lanterns waiting for the gala, down into the concrete quiet where 40 vehicles slept and a black notebook waited in a can beneath the tool cabinet. She would park the car, she would log the mileage, she would do her job because a woman who wanted to survive whatever came next did her job while the ground moved, and the ground was moving now, faster than it had that afternoon, faster than it had in 4 years. The concrete swallowed the headlights. Rows of sleeping cars threw back dull reflections, and the cold down here had a different weight than the cold outside, older, stiller, the kind that lived in a place the sun never reached. She rolled past Bay 3, where the black sedan with the cracked tire waited for morning, past the tool cabinet in the corner bay, with its can, and its notebook, and its 12 entries. She did not stop for the notebook. Not tonight. Some nights you did not open the box of the thing that could kill you. You only drove past it and let it know you remembered. At the bottom of the ramp, she cut the engine and sat in the dark for a moment longer than she needed to. 2 days until the gala, 38 until January, and somewhere above her, in a house that had spent 4 years teaching her to be furniture, a man was standing at a gold window with a sentence saved in the pocket over his heart, learning her name. 2 nights later, the mansion had 400 lights, and none of them were meant for her, and Cassandra stood at the mouth of the service corridor, holding a garment bag by the hanger, waiting for the second wave of caterers to clear the doorway before she moved. She had not driven anyone tonight. Someone else had brought the first car up the alley. That absence sat in her chest like a held breath, because for 4 years, the wheel had been the one thing no one could take from her, and now she had walked in through the staff entrance with a bag over her shoulder and no keys in her pocket. The corridor smelled of sterno and warming trays. 2 of the kitchen girls pressed against the wall to let a man with a tray of glasses pass, and one of them looked at the bag in Cassandra's hand, and then at Cassandra's face, and said nothing. Word had moved. Word always moved in a house like this. The driver who spoke. The driver who was supposed to be gone. She was not gone. A boy in a fleet vest jogged past with a coil of cable and did not see her. Above, through the ceiling, the string quartet had started, and the low churn of 300 voices came down through the beams like water through a floor. Cassandra found the small changing room off the linen store, the one the servers used, and she locked the door with the little brass hook. She hung the bag on the back of the door and pulled the zipper down in one stroke. The red came out of the dark like something with its own light. She had bought it 4 months ago, in cash, and it had lived in the bottom of her locker folded in tissue, and she had never once put it on. She did not put it on now to be seen. She put it on because a woman who owned a thing had the right to wear it, and tonight she meant to own something. The silk went over her shoulders and fell. It found the waist she kept hidden under the loose uniform, and it found the rest of her. And for the first time in 4 years, the shape of Cassandra Blair was not an apology folded into off-white cotton. She reached back for the zip. She fixed the small silver stud in her nose with one fingertip, the only piece of herself she had never taken off, and she looked at the strip of mirror on the wall. The nude gold heels went on, the thin gold earrings. She took the pins out of her hair and let it come down over her shoulders in the loose waves, the ends pale, and she shook it once with her fingers and left it. She did not smile at the mirror. She checked it. A driver checks a car before she takes it out. Then she unlocked the hook and stepped back into the corridor, and the boy with the cable came the other way and stopped so hard the coil swung off his shoulder. "Sorry," he said, to the floor, and went around her fast. She let that land and kept walking. The corridor fed into the east gallery through a service arch, and the service arch opened onto the top of the grand stair, and the grand stair went down in a wide curve into the ballroom, where 400 lights were burning for other people. That was the way in. There was no other way that did not cross the kitchens, and the kitchens were full. She was 6 steps from the arch when Mrs. Park came through it. The governess had her chain of keys at her hip and a folded length of gray cashmere over both forearms, carried the way you carry something you have been told to carry and do not want to. Park Yoon-ja had a round face made for kindness, and it was doing something else now, something pulled tight at the edges, and her eyes went over Cassandra's dress once, top to hem, and came back up wet. "Oh, child," she said, very low, "not tonight. Not in that. Mrs. Park, listen to me." The older woman closed the last of the distance and dropped her voice under the quartet. "She saw you. Before you were even dressed, she saw you." Her hands tightened on the gray wool. "There is a photograph." The words stopped Cassandra's foot mid-step. "What photograph?" Mrs. Park's mouth worked. "The proof book. The party planner's book. The guest proofs. For the seating. Someone put a photograph in it. Of you. In a red dress. From weeks ago." Her chin trembled once and she stilled it. She had it in her hand 10 minutes ago. She looked at it a long time, and then she looked at me, and she gave me this. She lifted the gray cashmere an inch. Cassandra looked at it and understood it before Mrs. Park said the rest. "She said to find you," Mrs. Park went on, and now the words came out flat, the way you read an order you are ashamed to be reading, "and to put this over your shoulders. To cover you." Her words were, the old woman swallowed, "cover her curves, before she comes down." For a moment neither of them moved, and the quartet turned a corner into something slower. So there had been a photograph before there had ever been a dress in a locker. Someone had stood on a corner near her building with a camera and a long lens, weeks ago, and had caught her in red on some ordinary errand, and that picture had traveled all the way up into the hands of the woman who ran this house, the gray car, the little black book in the tin under the tool cabinet. Cassandra kept her face smooth and let the cold move through her without showing on it. Someone had been watching her long enough to know the dress before she wore it. She looked at Mrs. Park's hands, at the wool draped over them like something dead. "You don't want to give me that," Cassandra said. "Not a question." "No." The old woman's eyes spilled, and she did not lift a hand to it. 22 years. She has never once asked me to make a woman smaller, a breath. But she is downstairs in an hour with 300 people and a family she is trying to sell, and if I go back without, then don't go back without it. Mrs. Park stopped. Cassandra put out her hand, palm up, and took the gray cashmere off the older woman's forearms, gently, the way you take a weight from someone who has carried it too long. The wool was heavy and soft and expensive. She held it a moment. Then she folded it once over her own arm, neat, and squared her shoulders under the red. "You gave it to me," she said. "You did what she said. You found me and you handed it over. That part's true, and nobody can take it from you. Cassandra, the rest is mine." She heard herself say it and felt the ground of it under her feet, firmer than the marble. For 4 years she had been furniture in this house, a thing that carried other people from door to door and did not speak. 2 nights ago she had spoken. Tonight she would arrive. Below them, through the arch, a voice on a small microphone asked the guests to make their way toward the east salon, and the churn of the crowd shifted and turned like a tide changing. "Where is she now?" Cassandra asked. "The upper landing." She comes down at the top of the hour, with the sun. Mrs. Park's hands, freed of the wool, twisted together. "Child, when she sees you have it and did not put it on, she'll see exactly that," Cassandra said, "that I had it and I didn't." She moved to the arch. The top of the grand stair opened in front of her, wide white marble curving down, a runner of dark carpet laid over the center of it, and below, the ballroom, and the light, and the quartet, and the 400 faces that were about to be pointed at the wrong staircase. She did not go down yet. She stepped to the side of the arch where the shadow of the pillar fell, and she waited, because timing was the whole of it, and a driver knows better than anyone that arriving is not about speed, it is about the second you choose. She heard the family before she saw them. Mi-suk's voice came along the upper gallery, low and even, the voice of a woman giving instructions she expected to be followed, and under it, the flatter sound of a man answering in single words. The jade ring clicked once against the marble rail. Then they came into the mouth of the gallery 20 feet to Cassandra's right, Mi-suk first, in dark Bordeaux, with the collar high at her throat, and the jade brooch and the rope of pearls, spine straight as a rule, and behind her, half a step, Jun-suk in the black tuxedo, the satin lapel catching the light, his hands loose at his sides, and his face closed the way a door is closed. Mi-suk was scanning the landing for her governess. She found, instead, the gray cashmere. She found it folded over the bare arm of a woman in red who was already standing at the top of her staircase. The older woman stopped. It was a small stop, a break in a stride so smooth most of the room would never have seen it, but Cassandra saw it, and she saw the jade ring come off the rail. "Mrs. Park," Mi-suk said, without turning her head, in Korean, and then, deliberately, in English, so it would carry. "I gave you one thing to do. She did it." Cassandra spoke before the governess could. Her voice was low, and it did not shake. "She found me. She gave me the shawl. She did everything you asked." Mi-suk's eyes came to her then, full on, and the two women looked at each other, across the dark carpet at the top of the stairs, while the party breathed below them. "You will put it on," Mi-suk said. Cassandra lifted the gray wool a little, the way Mrs. Park had lifted it to her, so the older woman could see it clearly. "This is beautiful cashmere," she said. "Warm, expensive." She let a beat pass. "Is it for the cold?" Mi-suk's jaw set. "You know what it is for." "I want to be sure I understand the house rules." Cassandra kept her tone mild, almost pleasant, the exact tone she had used 2 nights ago in the mirror of a moving car. "The women tonight. Miss C.O. in the Navy, the pianist's wife. Your guests, in whatever they chose to wear." She tilted her head a fraction. "Will each of them be handed a shawl at the top of the stairs, to cover them before they come down?" Something moved behind Mi-suk's eyes. Beside her, half a step back, Jun-suk had gone very still, and his gaze was not on his mother. It was on the woman in red, and it had not moved off her since the moment she spoke. "That is not the same," Mi-suk said. "No," Cassandra agreed softly. "It isn't." She let that hang. Then, without hurry, she reached out and laid the folded cashmere over the marble rail beside Mi-suk's hand, smoothing it flat once with her palm, so it would not slide, the way she might have straightened a blanket left in the back of a car. She returned the thing that had been meant to erase her, folded, undamaged, unworn. "Thank you," she said, "but no." And she turned to the stairs. She heard Mi-suk's breath draw in to say a thing, and she did not wait to hear the thing. She set the nude gold heel on the first white step and started down, one hand light on the rail, her chin level, the red silk moving with her, and behind and above her she heard the older woman's command die unspoken in the older woman's throat, because there was no way to finish it now that would not be louder and worse than the woman already walking away from it. The stair carried her down in its long curve, and the ballroom came up to meet her. She had crossed this floor 100 times. She had crossed it, carrying umbrellas and garment bags and other people's forgotten phones, in flat black shoes, along the edges where the staff go, and no one had ever once looked up. She had learned the exact size a person could make herself, so that a room full of important people would forget she was in it. She had spent 4 years learning to be small. It took 11 steps to unlearn it. There was a physics to it she had never been allowed to test. The loose uniform had a purpose beyond modesty. It flattened her into a silhouette a rich house could file and forget. Narrow shoulders and no waist, and nothing below it. A shape that carried bags and opened doors. The red did the opposite of flattening. It found the delicate line of her shoulders and the small of her waist, and then it found the wide sweep of her hips, and did not pretend they were not there, and the contrast of the two halves of her, the fine and the full, was the whole argument the uniform had been built to lose. Mi-suk had understood that argument perfectly. That was why the shawl. You do not cover a woman who does not need covering. You cover a woman whose shape can change the temperature of a room, and the temperature of the room was changing, because the room looked up. It did not happen all at once. It moved the way word moved in this house, from the base of the stair outward. The two men nearest the newel post first, one of them stopping his glass halfway to his mouth, then the cluster around the ice sculpture, then a ripple further out, heads turning on the current of other heads turning, conversations thinning in the middle of sentences, the quartet playing on into a room that was quietly, helplessly, reorienting itself toward the staircase. A woman in emerald touched her companion's sleeve. Somewhere a laugh cut off. The light that had been burning for 400 other people found the red silk on the white marble and did what light does. Cassandra kept her eyes soft and level, fixed on nothing, on the far doors, the way you keep your eyes on the road and let the mirrors do the watching. She let the mirrors do the watching now. She felt the room without meeting it. She did not smile. She descended. Halfway down, she found the one face she had known would be there. Jun-suk had come to the gallery rail above, and to her right, and he was looking down at her, the way a man looks at a thing that has walked out of a place he thought he had locked. 2 nights ago he had told his mother, in a dark car, that he could never want a woman like this, and he had said it to hide the wanting, and she had caught his eyes in the mirror before the lie left his mouth. Now there was no mirror between them, and no lie moving, and no mother's question to answer, and the closed door of his face had come open at the top, and he had not managed to shut it again. She held his eyes for exactly as long as it took to pass under him. 1 second, 2, long enough that he would know she had seen him seeing her. Then she gave the moment back to the room and went on down, and left him at the rail with his hand tightening on the marble, and the thing in his chest that he had 2 nights ago sworn did not exist. For a man who ran an empire on his ability to read a room and never be read, it was a bad night. A guest was speaking to him, an older man in a decoration sash, saying something about the port markets, a hand on his sleeve, and Jun-suk answered with a word that fit no part of the question and did not notice that it didn't. His eyes had gone down the curve of the marble and stayed. The older man followed the look, found the red dress at the bottom of it, and had the grace to laugh softly and take his hand back and drift away, and Jun-suk did not notice that either. He had built a life on control. He controlled the men in this room, and the men outside it, and the money that moved between them, and 2 nights ago, in a dark car, he had controlled his own face well enough to lie to his mother's eyes. He was not controlling anything now. He watched a woman he had spent 4 years never looking at walk across a floor she had crossed 1,000 times invisible, and he could not make himself look away, and the failure of it sat on him like a hand at the back of his neck. Behind him, his mother said his name again, sharper, and again it did not reach him. She reached the bottom step. She reached the floor, and the floor of the ballroom, which had spent 4 years agreeing not to notice her, made a small space around her without being asked, the way a crowd opens for someone it has decided is somebody. A server appeared at her elbow with a tray of glasses, uncertain, because she did not fit any category he had been briefed on, not a guest he'd been shown, not staff dressed like staff. She looked at the tray and did not take a glass. "Thank you," she said, and he flushed and moved on. And even that small refusal cost her nothing and bought her something, because a woman who does not need what is offered is a woman who has come for her own reasons. Above her, on the gallery, Mi-suk Han stood at the rail beside her son and looked down at the red dress in the cleared center of her ballroom, and her hand closed on the folded gray cashmere still lying where Cassandra had left it, and she gripped it. She had planned an entrance tonight, herself and the sun, the top of the hour, the slow descent, the family shown whole and agreeing to 300 witnesses, and one camera hired to make it permanent. She had planned a photograph of her own. The room was not looking at the top of the stairs anymore. The room was looking at the bottom. Mi-suk leaned a fraction toward her son and said something short and hard through her teeth, in Korean, and Jun-suk did not answer her, because he had not heard her. His attention was 3 feet below the rail and 40 feet down, and it was not coming back on command. "Jun-suk," she said the name like a hand on a bridle. "I heard you," he said. He had not. Below, Cassandra crossed the open floor without hurry, unhurried the way only a person with somewhere of her own to be is unhurried, and she chose her direction herself, toward the tall windows on the garden side, where the crowd was thinner, and she could stand with her back to nothing and see the whole room. A driver does not stand where she cannot see the exits. She set herself by the third window, half in the fall of a curtain, and she looked at the party as if the party were the road ahead, and she were merely waiting for it to be time to move. She was aware, without looking, of exactly where he was. She had spent 4 years being aware of where he was. A driver holds her passenger's position in her body the way she holds the road, and the habit did not switch off, because tonight she was not driving. She could feel him leave the rail. She could feel him not go where his mother's hand had tried to send him. She did not turn her head. Near the windows, a woman in navy, with a fine gold frame of glasses and a silver clutch, had detached herself from a knot of older men and was drifting, with a care that looked like accident, in Cassandra's direction. Seo Yuna's face was heart-shaped and soft, and her eyes behind the glasses were not soft at all. They were doing arithmetic. She stopped a polite arm's length away and looked out the window at the dark garden as if that were why she had come, and she spoke to the glass, in English, quiet. "You're the driver. I'm Cassandra. I know." Yuna turned the silver clutch once in her fingers. "I saw the photograph too." She left the book open on the console. I think she wanted people to see it. A small, exact pause. Or she wanted one person to. Cassandra kept her eyes on the room. "And who's the one person?" Yuna's mouth moved, not quite a smile. "That," she said, "is a very good question, and I don't think it's me." She glanced, briefly, up toward the gallery where Jun-suk was no longer standing, and then back at the dark window. "I'm supposed to be the reason we're all here tonight. Did you know that? I've heard the plan. So have I. From her, this afternoon." The clutch turned again. "There's more of it than you've heard. There's a part she hasn't said out loud yet." Something in the way she said it made Cassandra turn her head at last and look at the woman she was told was her rival, and find, behind the fine gold glasses, not a rival at all. "What part?" Cassandra said. But a bell was ringing somewhere near the salon doors, a small silver sound over the quartet, calling the room to gather, and a man in a brown suit that fit him badly was pushing through the crowd near the far wall with a fleet vest still half visible under the jacket and a phone pressed hard to his ear. And up on the emptied gallery, a shape in dark Bordeaux was moving toward the head of the stairs with 300 people about to be asked to turn and listen. and Seo Yuna's soft face closed like a book, and she stepped back into the crowd and left the question hanging in the air between them with its answer still inside it. Cassandra stood at the third window in a red dress with the whole lit room between her and the doors, and understood that the entrance had only ever been the easy part. She had come down these stairs to be seen. She had gotten what she came for. But being seen and being watched were not the same thing, and she had spent 6 weeks now with the difference written in a little black book in a tin under a tool cabinet, and the difference had just walked into the party wearing a brown suit that did not fit. Someone in this house had photographed her weeks before she wore this dress. Someone had known the red before there was a locker to hide it in. And Walter Osei, who ran her garage, who had handed her an order to write everyone's name beside their car, had stopped talking into his phone and was looking straight at her across 400 lights. Walter Osei lowered the phone. He didn't close the distance. He turned it in his hand once, thumb over the screen, and let the crowd swallow him sideways toward the buffet tables. Cassandra held her place by the window and let him go. She had his face now. She had the colored vest under the brown lapel. She had the way he'd looked at her before he looked away, which was the way a man looks at something he's already reported. She filed it where she kept the license plates. A waiter passed with a tray of amber glasses. She let it pass. Across the floor, near the base of the staircase, Mi-suk had reached the third step and stopped, one hand on the rail, the other flat against the beading at her waist, gathering the room by standing above it. The quartet softened. The silver bell had done its work. 300 faces were tilting toward the stairs, waiting for the mother of the house to open her mouth. And Jun-suk was not looking at his mother. He was crossing the floor toward the garden windows, and the crowd was opening for him the way crowds open for men who own the building, and he was looking at Cassandra the whole way across. She watched him come in the black glass first, the reflection walking toward her over the dark lawn, and then she turned and let him arrive in person, because a woman who watches a man only in the mirror teaches him he can approach unseen, and she was done teaching him anything for free. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that the two of them made a small private country at the edge of the ballroom, ringed by people pretending not to watch. "You didn't take a glass," he said. "No." He lifted 2 fingers. A waiter materialized, tray angled, glasses catching the chandelier. Jun-suk took one and held it out to her across the small gap, stem first. The way you hand a blade to someone you trust not to use it. Cassandra looked at the glass. She looked at his hand around the stem, the steel watch at his wrist catching light. She did not lift her own hand. "I don't drink on the property," she said. "You're not working tonight. I'm always working on this property. That's the arrangement." She let a beat sit there, ambient and pleasant, the tone she'd perfected over 4 years of not being agreed with. "You should know. Your mother wrote it." The glass stayed out between them a second too long. A woman near the piano noticed, and then didn't, and then told the man beside her something behind her hand. Jun-suk set the glass down on the sill, without turning to do it, without breaking her eyes, and the small defeat of putting it down himself moved through the watching ring like a current. "You embarrassed me on the stairs," he said, not angry, testing the word. "I walked down some stairs," she said, "in a dress I bought with my own money. If that embarrasses you, that's a small house you're living in." His jaw set. The scar over his eyebrow caught the light when the muscle jumped. He was a man who had never in his adult life been handed the bill for his own manners, and she'd handed it to him twice now, once in a car and once here, and both times he'd taken it because some part of him wanted to see how much it cost. "You said something," he said, in the car, when we stopped at the stairs. He kept his voice down. The ring of watchers had thinned. People got bored of 2 people who only talked. "You told me where I'd be one day. I remember what I said." So do I. His hand had gone to the inside of his jacket, over the left breast. An unconscious thing, a man touching a pocket to confirm something was still in it. He caught himself doing it and let the hand fall. I wrote it down. I know, Cassandra said. I watched you in the mirror. That stopped him. Not the words, the flat certainty under them, the fact that she'd seen him do the private thing and had simply filed it away for 2 days without spending it, the way she filed everything, the way a person files what they intend to use later. Why would you keep that? He said, the exact words, the time. Ask yourself. She let the pleasant tone thin, just at the edges. You're the one carrying it against your heart at your mother's party. The muscle in his jaw jumped again. Around them, the quartet found a slow 3 count, and couples drifted toward the polished center of the room, and Jun-Suk Han stood in front of a driver, with his hand no longer near his pocket, and no play left in his face. Dance with me, he said. It wasn't a question. The quartet, sensing the mother's speech had stalled, had drifted back into something with a slow 3 count, and couples were finding the polished center of the floor the way iron finds a magnet. No, Cassandra said. The word landed flat and clear. She didn't soften it, didn't dress it, didn't offer a reason he could argue with. She'd learned reasons were doors. A plain no was a wall. Something crossed his face that she'd never seen on a Han. Not fury. Fury she could have used. This was closer to bewilderment, the look of a man who has run every play in the book and watched the ball go through his hands. You'd rather stand at a window, he said. I'd rather stand where I chose to stand. Then she looked past his shoulder, and she saw Han Deok-soo. The head of security was near the service arch, in his black suit and black shirt, the earpiece a pale thread down his collar, and he was watching the room the way he always watched it, everywhere at once, nothing on his face. He had opened the car door 2 nights ago. He had heard her say the sentence about the man's feet, and he had said nothing, then or since, which in the grammar of this house was a kind of loyalty. Cassandra stepped around Jun-Suk, not away from him. Around him, the way you go around a parked car. She crossed 6 feet of open marble in her red dress and stopped in front of Han Deok-soo, and 300 people watched the driver walk up to the bodyguard, and she said, loud enough for the nearest 10, Deok-soo, dance with me. The man's small, attentive eyes moved once to Jun-Suk, a half-second, asking, and whatever he read on his boss's face, whatever a man like Han Deok-soo could read in a half-second, he made his own decision. Yes, ma'am, he said. He peeled the leather gloves off finger by finger and folded them into his inside pocket, because you do not put a gloved hand on a lady, and the small courtesy of it, the bare hands, was worth more than every glass Jun-Suk had lifted. He offered his palm. She set her hand in it. He walked her onto the floor in front of the man who had asked her first. They danced. He was good, which surprised her, light for his size, sure on the turns, keeping a respectful handspan of air between them so no one could ever say a word. He didn't speak. She didn't need him to. The message was for one man, and that man was standing at the garden window with his hands empty, watching the woman he'd told his mother he could never want move in slow circles with his own head of security, in red, under 400 lights, choosing anyone in the room but him. He's watching, Deok-soo murmured on a turn, barely moving his mouth. I know. His mother too. Let them. They came around again, slow, and Deok-soo's small eyes did their sweep of the room, even here, even dancing. The doors, the arches, the balcony, back. A man who couldn't stop working. She'd seen it in herself for 4 years. You should know something, he said, so low it barely reached her. The order came down last week to change the fleet roster, names beside the cars. That's never happened before. I wrote it, Cassandra said. Walter brought it to me. The turn hid whatever moved across his square face. Walter brought it to you. A pause the length of a step. Walter didn't get that order from the family office. I'd have logged it. It came from somewhere else. He brought her through the turn, and his voice went flatter still. Be at the wheel of your own life, ma'am. That's all I'll say in this room. I already am, she said. January. He didn't ask what she meant. He was a man who understood that a date, said plainly, was a whole plan a person didn't need explained. He only tightened the correct handspan and brought them level with the beat. On the far side of the floor, Mi-suk stood 2 steps up with the room's speech dying unspoken in her throat. She had climbed those steps to be looked at. She had brought 300 witnesses to see order, to see a family that agreed, and instead, the whole beautiful machine of the evening had swung its face away from her twice in 1 hour and pointed itself at a driver. The jade ring came off the rail. Her knuckle pressed white where it gripped the beading at her waist. She said a name, once. Not the microphone name, not the speech. Just, low and cutting, Jun-suk. A command to come back to her side and let the moment be repaired. He didn't move from the window. The song wound toward its end. Deok-soo slowed the turns, read the music the way he read rooms, and brought her to a clean stop as the last note fell. He stepped back exactly the correct distance. He bowed his head, not deep, the bow of one professional to another. Thank you, he said, and he meant it, and she understood that he was thanking her for something larger than a dance, for making a moment in this house that belonged to neither the mother nor the son. Thank you, Deok-soo. She let him retreat to his arch and his earpiece and his everywhere eyes, and she did not look at Jun-suk, because a woman who checks whether the wound landed teaches the man it mattered, and she wanted him to spend the rest of the night not sure. She turned back toward her window. She didn't reach it. You did that on purpose. Seo Yuna had come out of the crowd at the garden side, navy dress, thin gold frames, the silver clutch held in both hands against her stomach, like something she was keeping closed. Up close, her face was doing a careful thing, the mouth arranged for anyone watching, the eyes doing separate urgent work behind the gold rims. Behind her, a step back, stood an older man Cassandra had seen, only in the reflected glances of the room. Silver hair, a decoration on his lapel, the stillness of money that has never once been asked to wait. Yuna's father. I danced with a friend, Cassandra said. You danced with his shadow while he stood there holding a drink he had to put down himself. A breath. The mouth stayed pleasant. I've watched women try to get under his skin for 10 years. None of them thought to do it by ignoring him. I'm not trying to get under anyone's skin. I know. Yuna's eyes flicked once to the staircase, to Mi-suk 2 steps up, and came back fast. That's why it's working. The older man leaned in half an inch. Yuna, he said, quiet, in the tone fathers use when a daughter is standing too close to the edge of a stage. His English was accented, precise. The photographs. In a moment, Appa, she didn't turn to him. She held Cassandra's eyes, and she made a decision, the same kind of decision Deok-soo had made, a person choosing between the safe silence and the true word. The clutch pressed harder against her stomach. Listen to me, Yuna said, low and fast, under the returning music. I don't have long. She's going to bring my father to the top of the stairs. She's going to make the speech she came down to make, and before midnight, in front of all of them, a small tilt of her head at the 300, she's going to announce it. The engagement, mine and his, tonight. As a fact, not a proposal, an announcement, so that when the papers write it up in the morning, it's already done and no one can take it back. Cassandra kept her face level. Inside, the last shape clicked into the frame. The phone Mi-suk had turned face down in the car. The marriage before spring. The photographs for the record. The whole engine of the evening. Yuna had said in the ballroom an hour ago that there was a part of the plan not yet spoken aloud. This was the part. Does he know? Cassandra asked. He knows she wants it. He doesn't know she's decided to do it tonight, in public, with 300 witnesses and my father's hand in his, so that saying no would mean shaming two families at once. Yuna's jaw tightened. That's her whole method. She doesn't ask you to agree. She builds a room where disagreeing costs more than you can pay, and then she opens the door and lets you walk in. Why are you telling me? For the first time, the careful mouth broke, just at one corner, into something that was almost a real expression. Because I don't want to marry him, Yuna said. I never did. He never did. We've both been standing in her room for a year, being polite, waiting for someone to open a window. She looked at the red dress, at the woman inside it who had walked down a staircase and turned an entire ballroom around, and the almost smile finished itself. You walked in here tonight and opened a window. I'm not going to be the one to close it. Behind her, the father's patience thinned. Yuna, harder now. He's a good man, my father, Yuna said quickly, still to Cassandra. He thinks this match is a kindness to me. He doesn't know I've been dreading it since the day it was arranged. If she announces it up there, he'll clap, everyone will clap, and it will be true because a room made it true. Her eyes went urgent, the negotiation in them naked now. You've already broken her rhythm twice tonight. The stairs, the dance. She was supposed to own every eye in this house, and instead she keeps losing them to you. She's off balance. That's the only reason there's still time. Time for what? Cassandra said, though she was already ahead of the answer. For someone to be standing in the wrong place when she opens her door. Yuna pressed the clutch flat. I can't do it. I'm the bride. Anything I say up there, and it's a scandal about me, about my family, and my father wears it for the rest of his life. But you, she stopped, chose the word, spent it. You're not afraid of her. I've watched everyone in this house be afraid of her for a decade, and I have never once seen it on you. Being unafraid isn't a plan. No, Yuna's eyes flicked to the stairs a third time. Misuk had turned to murmur something to a man with a folder, the planner, Cassandra thought, the one whose proof book had held her own photograph. The speech was minutes away, not hours. But it's the only thing in this room she didn't account for. She built her whole evening around people who'd rather die than embarrass her in front of 300 guests. She never once planned for a woman who'd already decided to leave in January and has nothing left to lose. The words hit a nerve Cassandra hadn't shown anyone. Her face didn't move, but something behind her ribs did. One hard beat, because Yuna had reached into her and found the January in her, the receipt in the wallet, the 40 days, without ever being told, the way a smart woman reads another smart woman across a crowded room. You don't know anything about what I have to lose, Cassandra said, not a denial, a door closing gently. I know a woman spends 4 months of wages on a dress she keeps in a locker and never wears, Yuna said, until the night she's decided none of it matters anymore. She let that sit. I don't need to know the rest. The father took his daughter's elbow, courteous, immovable. Say, oh, Yuna, now. Yuna let herself be turned, but she leaned back 1/2 step, and she said the last of it fast and quiet, the way you push a folded note into a hand. When she makes the speech, watch him, not her, him. If he stays silent, it's done, and by morning it's in every paper, and neither of us ever gets the window again. A breath. She's counting on him being the same coward he's been for a year. Give him a reason not to be. Then, the older man walked his daughter back into the light, toward the base of the staircase, toward the photographs, and Cassandra was alone at the garden window, with a plan that wasn't a plan, and a clock that had just started running. She turned to the glass. In the black lawn, she found the whole room laid out in reflection, the quartet resettling, the planner climbing to Misuk's side with his folder, Han Deoksu at his arch with his bare hands folded away again, Walter Osei near the buffet with the phone back at his ear and his eyes. She noticed now, not on the stairs where the announcement would come, but on the doors, on the exits, on the service arch that led down to the garage. She held very still. A man who works a garage watches cars. A man who watches cars, on the biggest night of the house's year, does not watch the staircase where the family theater is about to happen. He watches the way out. He watches the doors like a man who knows when something is going to come through one of them, and wants to know he can be somewhere else when it does. Cassandra had a notebook in a tin under a tool cabinet, with 12 gray car entries in it. She had a photograph of herself in red that someone took weeks before there was a locker to hide the dress in. She had a mother's order to write every driver's name beside every car, and she had, standing 40 feet away in a badly cut brown suit, the man who'd handed her that order, watching the doors instead of the show. None of it connected yet, but it had stopped being 4 separate wrong things. It had started leaning toward a single shape she couldn't quite see the edges of, the way headlights find a wall in fog before you can read what's painted on it. She ran the arithmetic the way she ran a route. The order to name every driver beside every car. That wasn't a roster. That was a map of who touched what, who could be alone with a vehicle, who could be trusted, and who watched. Deoksu said it didn't come from the family office. Yuna said Misuk built rooms where the exits were already accounted for. And Walter, who'd carried the order down to the garage himself, was standing here in a rented suit with his back to the family theater, counting doors. You didn't build a map of your own drivers to plan a wedding. You built it to find a leak. And a woman who suspected a leak in her own house didn't hand the mapping to the person she trusted least. She handed it to the person doing the leaking so she could watch what they wrote down. Cassandra's hands stayed loose at her sides. Her breathing didn't change. But she understood, standing in red at the glass, that she had been the pin on someone's map for 6 weeks. The gray car, the pharmacy, the laundromat, the corner of her own street, and that the photograph in the proof book had never been about a dress. It had been a caption under a suspect. The question wasn't who was watching her anymore. She'd known that for 6 weeks. The question was which side of this house had put the eyes on her, and which side had put the car at the top of the ramp, and whether they were the same side or 2 enemies who'd both decided, for opposite reasons, that the driver who wouldn't stay quiet needed watching tonight of all nights. Across the room, Misuk lifted her hand. The quartet fell silent mid-phrase. The planner stepped back. 300 faces, gathered and pointed, tilted up the staircase to the woman in dark Bordeaux with the jade at her throat, and a hush rolled out across the marble, the way water finds the low place in a floor. "Friends," Misuk said, and her voice carried without effort, trained on decades of rooms that went quiet when she spoke. "Old friends, new year." She let the warmth sit on it, gracious, the matriarch at the top of her own beautiful stairs. "My late husband built this family from nothing, and one promise, that we would always know exactly who we are." At the base of the stairs, Seo Yuna stood beside her father, hands folded on the silver clutch, her chin up, and her eyes finding Cassandra across the whole width of the floor. "Watch him," the eyes said. Not her, him. Cassandra found Junsuk. He had moved from the window. He stood now at the edge of the cleared floor, alone in the way powerful men are allowed to be alone in a crowd, and he was looking up at his mother with a face gone perfectly still, the face of a man who has just understood, 1 sentence too late, what the speech is going to be. "Tonight," Misuk said, and her hand opened toward the base of the stairs, toward the Seo family, toward her son, with the Seo family beside us. "I want to share the joy that begins our year." And Cassandra, standing in red at the garden window with the whole engine of the house turning toward a marriage that two people at the bottom of the stairs had been dreading for a year, took one step off the wall. She didn't know yet what she'd say. She only knew that Yuna was right about one thing. Mi-suk had built a room where saying no cost more than anyone could pay, and there was exactly one person in it who'd already decided, 40 days ago, that she was done paying this family anything at all. Mi-suk drew the breath for the next word, the one that would make it a fact, the one the papers would print by morning. Somewhere below the ballroom, past the service arch Walter Osei had been watching all night, deep in the concrete under the mansion where a black notebook waited in a tin, a car that did not belong to the house rolled quietly to the top of the garage ramp and cut its lights. The word came out of Mi-suk's mouth clean and final. Engagement. She let it hang. 300 faces held it with her. Then she lifted her hand toward the Seo family, toward the silver-haired father, toward Yuna, in navy at the foot of the stairs, and the room made the sound a room makes when it has been told what to feel. Cassandra watched Junsuk. She had stepped off the wall and she did not step back. She watched the muscle jump under the thin scar above his eye. She watched him find his mother on the third step, then find the father, then find the girl who did not want him any more than he wanted her. She watched him open his mouth and close it. He was going to be too slow. She could see the whole shape of it. He would let the applause finish, and then he would say something careful, and by the time he said it, the papers would already have the photograph, and the careful thing would sound like a man walking it back, instead of a man refusing. The applause finished. He said nothing. That was the moment Cassandra stopped waiting for him. She had spent 4 years learning where every exit in this house was. She knew which doors the caterers used and which ones the family pretended didn't exist. She knew the service arch behind the quartet dropped to a landing, and the landing dropped to the corridor that ran the length of the kitchens, and the corridor ended at the steel door that opened onto the top of the garage ramp. She knew it the way she knew the wheel. She was not going to stand in a red dress and let a room clap at a lie while the man who wrote her sentence against his heart chose silence over her twice in 1 week. She turned. The clutch stayed where it was in her mind. She'd brought nothing, no keys, no coat, nothing that made her a driver tonight. She had brought the dress and the piercing and the thing under the dress that this house had spent 6 weeks trying to photograph. That was all. It was enough to leave with. Mi-suk's voice climbed behind her, warm now, doing the part of the speech where the mother thanks the guests for witnessing. Somewhere in it, Cassandra heard her own absence begin to matter. A woman in red does not simply walk out of a scene the matriarch built. The turning of one back pulls at the edge of 300. She kept her chin level and moved along the wall toward the service arch, unhurried, the way she took a corner with a full car. No brake, no jerk, just the line. A waiter with an empty tray stepped out of her way without being asked. The boy from the fleet, the one in the vest who had frozen when she came down the stairs, was standing at the arch with a phone dark in his hand and his mouth already open to say something to her. She passed him before the something arrived. The landing behind the arch was cooler. The music thinned to a wall of strings, and the crowd became a hum through plaster. Cassandra took the 2 steps down and let her shoulders drop half an inch, the first half inch they'd dropped all night. It was here, in the quiet, that the night finally reached her. She had come down a staircase in a dress she'd paid for over 4 months and made 300 people forget the woman at the top of the stairs. She had returned a shawl to the hand that tried to shrink her. She had danced with the chief of security in front of the man who wanted her and left him holding air, and it had bought her nothing. The mother had stood on the 3rd step and turned all of it into a footnote under a wedding, and the son had stood at the edge of the room with the words in his breast pocket and let her do it. Cassandra pressed 2 fingers to the cool plaster of the wall to steady the thing rising in her chest, and named it to herself once, flat, so it couldn't grow. They had let her be the show, and then they had gone on with the program. 4 years. 4 winters of ice on the private road. 10,000 miles of the back of their heads in the mirror. And tonight, dressed like a person, she'd learned the exact size of the space they kept for her. A beautiful interruption between 2 paragraphs of their own story. She breathed out through her nose. The rising thing settled. She did not cry in this house. She had never cried in this house, and she was not going to start on the night she left it. Then she heard the shoes. Not hers. Hers were quiet on the runner. These were harder, coming up from the corridor below, fast. A man's weight taken at a near run, and then reined in hard, 3 steps from the bottom of the stairs, the way you rein in when you remember you're supposed to look calm. Han Deok-soo came up onto the landing with his gloves back on. He had the earpiece pressed. His jaw was set in a way she had not seen it set on the ballroom floor. Not when he danced. Not when he told her the roster came from somewhere else. His eyes went to her and stayed, and she understood before he said anything that whatever had made him run had also made him glad, in some grim animal corner, to find her here instead of out there. "You shouldn't be back here," he said, low. "I'm leaving." Not through the ramp. He said it fast. Then, quieter, as if the plaster had ears. "There's a car at the top of the ramp that doesn't belong to the house." The corridor went very still around Cassandra's ribs. "Whose?" she said. Not a question either. "Don't know yet. Came up quiet 10 minutes ago and killed its lights before it reached the apron. No plate we called ahead. My man on the door radioed it, and then his radio went to nothing." Deok-soo's glove flexed. "I've got 2 on the kitchen stairs, and I sent one down to look. I want you back inside where there are 400 witnesses." 10 minutes ago, Cassandra said. "About." She was already moving, not toward the ballroom, toward the corridor, toward the down, toward the steel door and the ramp beyond it, and Deok-soo's glove caught her forearm, not hard, a professional's grip, the kind that could become a real grip in half a second and was letting her know it. "Blair, I need to see the car." "You don't need to see anything. You need to be upstairs." Deok-soo. She turned her head and let him have her eyes at full range for the first time. "I've seen that car before." His hand loosened a degree. "What do you mean, you've seen it?" "I mean, I have a plate for it. I have a color. I have a Friday, 6:40 in the evening, 2 men inside, on the corner by my building." Her voice stayed level, and that was the thing that took the last of the doubt out of his face, more than the words, the flatness of them, a woman reading a list she'd read to herself 100 nights. "I mean, I've been writing it down for 6 weeks, and nobody in this house would have believed me if I'd said it out loud, and now it's at the top of your ramp with its lights off during the party." For a moment, neither of them moved. Below them, a pot rang against a burner. Above them, the strings swelled and the room laughed at something the matriarch said. "Write it down where?" Deok-soo said. "A book, in the garage, in a tin, under the tool cabinet in the corner bay." He looked at her for one more second. Then he touched the earpiece and said 3 words in Korean she didn't need translated, because a chief of security only uses that tone once a night, and stepped past her toward the down, and she went with him, because he no longer tried to stop her. The corridor smelled of sterno and steel and the cold coming up from the concrete. They took it fast, past the racked trays, past a girl in kitchen whites who flattened herself to the wall with her eyes gone wide, past the caterer's dolly of empty champagne. Deok-soo's shoulder led. Cassandra's heels did not slow her. She'd walked worse floors in worse shoes, and she kept his pace with the hem of the red dress gathered in one fist. Halfway down, Deok-soo spoke without turning his head. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. "And you told nobody." "Who would I have told?" She said it without heat. keeping her voice under the hum of the kitchens. Your office reports to the family. The family is the reason a woman like me doesn't get believed twice. I told a book. His glove flexed at his side. You should have come to me. I didn't know you were a man who'd listen until an hour ago, on the dance floor. She let a beat pass. You told me to be at the wheel of my own life. This is what that looks like from the inside. He didn't answer that, but his pace opened a fraction to let her come even with him instead of behind, and she understood the gesture for what it was, not courtesy, a man deciding, mid-run, whose eyes he trusted on a floor he didn't own. When we get to the door, he said, you look, you tell me, and then you do exactly what I say. If I put you behind me, you go behind me, and you stay there. And if what you say is wrong for this floor? His jaw moved. Then you tell me fast and quiet, and I decide. Not you. That I can do. The steel door at the end was propped. That was wrong. It was never propped. Someone had put a folded catering card under it to keep it from latching, and the card had a boot scuff across it. Deok-soo put his hand flat on the door and did not open it. He tilted his head to the earpiece, listened. His face did the small thing a face does when the voice it's waiting for does not come. My man's not answering, he said, almost to himself. How many ways down to the floor from here? This, the kitchen stairs, the vehicle ramp. He looked at her. You know that. I know that. She let the hem go. The ramp door at the bottom. Is it up or down tonight? Down. Locked. Gala protocol. Then anything that came up the ramp is standing on the apron, with nowhere to go but back out or through the pedestrian door beside it. And the pedestrian door beside it opens on this corridor. She nodded at the steel in front of them. This one. Deok-soo's jaw worked once. Then he keyed the earpiece and spoke fast and hard. And this time, Cassandra heard a name in it. A name she knew, the young driver's name, the boy she'd made top off the coolant 2 days ago, the one who'd said he'd checked the second sedan when he hadn't. That boy was down there somewhere on the floor she'd walked 10,000 times, and she felt the cold of that land in her chest before she'd decided to feel anything. He's on the floor tonight, she said. Rotation. He parks late arrivals. Deok-soo didn't look at her. He'd have been at the apron. Cassandra put her hand on the steel beside his. Then open it slow, she said. And let me look first. I know what the car looks like. You don't. You'll be looking at 40 cars and one wrong one. I'll be looking at one. He didn't like it. She could see the whole argument move across him and lose. He was a man who traded in seconds, and she was offering him the fastest way to spend the next one. Behind me, he said, the second I say, the second you say. He drew a breath, took the weight of the door on his gloved palm, and eased it off the latch. The cold came through the gap first, then the dark. The garage ran on its low night circuit during the gala, every third fixture, so the floor was a field of pooled orange and long shade, and the smell of it hit her like her own name, rubber and cold oil and the ghost of exhaust, the smell of the only place in this house that had ever belonged to her. She looked. 2 rows down, in the corner bay, near the tool cabinet where the tin sat under the shelf with 6 weeks of a stranger's habits written inside it, a car sat nose out that she had never parked, gray, 4-door, sitting low on its springs the way a car sits when it's carrying 4 grown men and not 2. She knew it before her mind finished the sentence. She knew it the way you know a face in a crowd before you know why. The dent low on the passenger door she'd noted on a Tuesday. The aftermarket fog lamp, dark now, that she'd written down because it sat a 1/4 inch crooked. The plate. She couldn't read the plate from here in the orange dark. But she didn't need to. She had it in the book. She had it in her head. She'd had it for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of this car on the corner by her building. 6 weeks of it outside the pharmacy where she called her mother from the payphone. 6 weeks of it, 2 lengths back in the lavanderia lot, patient, 2 men inside, never once following her onto the estate. Never once, because they'd been learning her, learning the driver who knew every road off this hill, and every gate code, and every blind bay on this floor. She'd thought they were hunting her. She'd been half right. They'd been reading her the way you read the one servant who could open a house from the inside. And now the same car sat on the wrong side of a locked ramp during the one night the family put 300 witnesses and its whole name in one room. Whoever these men answered to, it was not this house. This house didn't need to sneak up its own ramp with its lights killed. This car had spent 6 weeks memorizing the way in, and tonight it had used it. Her mouth had gone dry. She swallowed it down and kept her eyes moving, the way she cleared an intersection, left, center, right, the shapes between the cars, the places a fourth man could stand. Her hand found Deoksu's sleeve without her telling it to. That one, she breathed. Corner bay, gray, nose out. He went very still beside her. You're sure? I've got its plate in a tin 8 feet from where it's parked. A sound came up out of her that wasn't quite a laugh. They parked their own surveillance car next to the book I kept on them, and they don't even know the book is there. Between the gray car and the ramp door, a shape lay on the concrete that was not a shape the floor was supposed to have. She saw it a half second before Deoksu did, because she knew the floor and he didn't. Knew where the oil catch pan sat, and where the drain grate was, and where nothing was ever supposed to be lying. It was long and it was low, and one arm of it was out at the wrong angle, and it wore a fleet vest, pale in the orange light, and it did not move. The boy, the one she'd corrected 2 days ago over a coolant reservoir a thumb below the line, the one who'd lied about checking the second sedan and then filled it under her eye and learned something about the weight of small jobs. 19, maybe 20, parking late arrivals because it was New Year's and every hand was on the floor. Cassandra's body went forward before Deoksu's glove closed on her shoulder and hauled her back against the doorframe, flat, hard, his other hand up and open in front of her face. Stop, wait, not yet. And she stopped, because the part of her that had driven this family through 4 winters of ice knew that you do not run into the middle of a thing you can't see the edges of. But she watched the shape on the concrete, the way you watch a chest you need to rise, and it rose. Small, shallow, but it rose, and fell, and rose. She let the breath she was holding go against the cold steel of the frame. He's breathing, she said, so low it was barely sound. By the drain grate, he's breathing. You can see that from here. I know where his chest is supposed to be. She kept her eyes on it. It's moving. Whatever they did, they didn't finish it. They needed quiet, not a body. A body brings the whole house down here before midnight. Deoksu's glove tightened once on her shoulder, not warning now, something closer to acknowledgement, and then eased. Deoksu's mouth was at her ear. How many doors on that car? 4. How many open? She looked. Her eyes had the dark now. The gray car sat closed and dark and wrong, and past it, in the deeper shade near the ramp door, 2 of the pooled orange lights were out that should have been on, not third circuit dark, deliberate dark, the dark of a bulb loosened by a hand that wanted a corridor of shadow between the car and the way up. None open, she said. But they're not in the car. How do you know? Because you loosen the lights on your way in, not on your way out. She heard her own voice go to the flat calm she used with a passenger in a skid. They're already inside the house. That's an empty car with a man down beside it, and a clear dark line from the ramp to this door. Deoksu swore, once, soft. Above them, muffled through 2 floors of stone and plaster, the string quartet reached the top of its phrase, and 300 people, who thought the most dangerous thing in the building was a matriarch's speech, laughed again at something Cassandra couldn't hear. She thought about the phone in Misuk's lap 2 nights ago, turning face down, unanswered, a call the woman had feared. She thought about the roster and the names beside the cars, a map of who touched what. She thought about Walter Osei watching the doors instead of the stairs, the fleet vest under his brown suit, the phone at his ear turned toward the ramp all night. She thought about a photograph of herself in red, placed where one person would see it, a caption under a suspect. She thought about all of it in the time it took Deoksu to key his earpiece, and for the first time in 4 years, the pieces stopped being small and scattered, and became one shape, and the shape had a mouth, and the mouth was open on the floor she loved, with a fleet vest pale in the dark. Deoksu. She got a hand flat on his chest, over the tactical line of him, and pushed just enough to make him look at her instead of the car. Listen to me before you call the room. I don't have time to. You have this second. Spend it. She pinned him with it. If you flood this floor with security right now, they hear it, and they go up. There's one clean way up from here, into 300 people in evening clothes, and it runs right past that speech. She tilted her head a half-degree back toward the ballroom, toward the mother, toward the son who'd said nothing. You want them contained down here, not up there, and nobody in this house knows this floor better than the woman who's driven off it every day for 4 years. Not you, not Walter, not them. He stared at her. The earpiece hissed. His man on the floor still wasn't answering. The ramp doors down and locked, she went on, fast, low, laying it out the way she'd lay out a route. So they came up on foot before it locked, or they've got the code, and either way they're not driving out, they're walking out, through a house full of guests, in evening clothes, looking like they belong. That's the plan. Slip up during the toast, do whatever they came to do, walk out the front with everyone else at midnight. The car stays. The car was never the way out, the car was the way in. Deoksu's eyes moved from her to the gray sedan and back, and she watched him check her math against his own and find it standing. So we don't chase the car, he said slowly. We take the stairs they need. The kitchen stairs and this corridor are the only quiet ways up. Put your men on both, and they've got one loud way left. Up the main service arch, past the quartet, into the light. They won't take it. They'll wait. And while they wait, you close the floor behind them, and they've got nowhere to be but down here, in the dark, with the door they came through shut. You're in a red dress, he said. It was not an argument. It was the last thing standing between him and agreeing. Then I'll be the thing they look at, Cassandra said, while you move behind me. He held her eyes a second longer. Then he touched the earpiece and gave it low and even, one order, then another. The kitchen stairs, this corridor, hold the arch, nobody comes down loud, and she heard the floor above them start to move in the quiet way a trained house moves when it's told to close without letting the party feel it. He was doing it her way, on her floor, with her math. For the first time in 4 years, someone in this house had taken her word and spent it like it was worth something, and she filed the strange warmth of that somewhere to feel later, because there was no room for it now. Stay in the door until I clear the first row, Deoksu breathed. If it goes wrong, you go up and you scream fire, not thieves. Fire empties a room, thieves fills it. Fire, she said. Understood. For one long breath, the garage held them both in the doorway, the cold coming up off the concrete, the boy breathing shallow by the drain grate, the gray car sitting dark 8 feet from a tin that held its own confession, 300 people laughing 2 floors up, the matriarch's voice climbing toward a toast that no one in that room knew was already over. Then, from the deep shade past the gray car, near the loosened lights, a second shape moved that wasn't a car and wasn't the boy. A man's shoulder, unhurried, stepping out of the dark the way a man steps who thinks the house is still asleep, and Han Deoksu's gloved hand closed hard around Cassandra's wrist and drew her back 1 inch into the black of the doorway, and above them, bright and warm and useless, Mi-suk Han lifted her glass and asked 300 guests to drink to the year that was already burning down around them. The shoulder came out of the shadow, and then the whole man followed it. One of the rivals, jacket zipped to the throat, a short bar of metal held low against his thigh. He moved toward the pedestrian door, the way a man moves through a house he thinks is asleep. Cassandra watched him take 3 steps. On the 4th he passed under one of the loosened bulbs, and the dark ate him again, and that was the thing she needed to know. He trusted the corridor of shadow. He had been told to trust it. Deoksu's grip tightened on her wrist, a question. She turned her hand palm up under his fingers and pressed once, slow. Wait. He waited. She counted the man's steps to the wall, then the pause, then a low double knock against steel, 2 bays down. A signal to someone already inside the corridor system, someone she couldn't see, so there were more. She had guessed 4 from the springs. Now she believed it. 2 below, minimum, she breathed. 1 at the cook stair. He just knocked to it. How do you know it's the stair? Because that's the only door on that wall. Deoksu's jaw moved. He keyed the earpiece twice, soft, and somewhere above them, a lock went home without a sound. The cook stair sealed. The man in the garage knocked again, harder, and got nothing back. And Cassandra felt the exact moment his certainty cracked. His head came up, his weight shifted onto the balls of his feet, and a man who came to open a sleeping house discovered the house had turned over in its sleep. Now he's afraid, she said. Afraid men go back to what they know. He'll go back to the car. Then he takes the boy on the way. Her stomach dropped. The young driver, down by the drain grate, chest rising, on the rival's path back to the gray sedan. No, she said. He doesn't. She pulled her wrist free of Deoksu's hand, and he let her, which told her something about how far they'd come in 20 minutes. She slid 1 sandal off, then the other, and left them in the black of the doorway. Bare feet on the concrete she'd walked 4 years. She knew where the oil drip was in Bay 2. She knew the grate covers that rocked. She knew this floor in the dark better than any man breathing rival breath into it. Give me the boy, she said. You take the car. Cassandra. He memorized this floor from a car window. I own it. She was already moving, low, along the shadow line he thought was his. Kill the 3rd light when I reach the pillar, not before. She went. The red dress was the wrong thing to be wearing, and she knew it, and she used it anyway, because the loosened bulbs meant the shadow was hers as much as his, and a woman who has been invisible for 4 years knows exactly how to not be seen. She reached the pillar. Behind her, the 3rd light died. The garage folded another shade darker, and the rival's man froze, blind for the half-second his eyes needed, and in that half-second, Cassandra crossed the last 8 feet to the boy and got both hands under his arms. He was heavier than the whole future she'd built in her head. She dragged him a foot, 2. His heel caught the grate and the cover rocked and rang. 1 clear note, and the man spun toward it with the bar coming up. Deoksu hit him from the dark side. There was no fight worth the name. A chief of security who has spent 40 years learning where a spine folds does not fight, he ends. The bar skated under the gray sedan. The man went down against the drain and stayed there, and Deoksu knelt on him with 1 knee and had the plastic cuffs out of his own coat before the sound finished dying in the concrete. Cassandra didn't stop to watch. She had the boy's collar in both fists, and she pulled him into the doorway she'd left her sandals in, into the black, and she put 2 fingers on his throat, the way she'd been taught to check a thing was still running. He was. His eyes rolled under the lids. She turned his head so if he was sick he wouldn't choke on it, and she stayed low over him, and only then did she let herself breathe all the way down. His hand found her sleeve. The boy, the same one who'd told her he'd checked the coolant when he hadn't, got a word out through split lips. 2, he said. Went up. Kitchen way. His eyes tried to fix on her and slid off. I told them your bays. The route. So they'd let me park. Shame moved under the pain. I'm sorry. You told them a map, Cassandra said against his ear. Steady. I built the map. That's not on you. She pressed his shoulder flat, the way she'd once made him fill a reservoir. 2 went up. Is worth more than any tire. Now stay down. Stay breathing. That's the whole job. 1, Deoksu said, low, from the car. Where are the rest? The knock had gone to the cook stair. The stair was sealed, which meant the men who'd gone up had gone up before the seal. They were in the house. In the corridors under 300 guests, and a woman raising a glass to a year already burning. They're up, Cassandra said. They went up before you locked it. How many? 2, maybe 3. She was already doing the arithmetic, fast, the way she did rows of cars. They didn't come to rob a garage, Deoksu. You don't study a driver for 6 weeks to steal a car. They came for a person. Which person? She looked at him across the boy's body, across the dark, and she said the only name the math allowed. The one the whole city knows is home tonight. The one whose mother put his engagement on a stage an hour ago. She stood. They came for Junsuk. 2 floors up, the ballroom was still applauding a wedding that hadn't happened. Misuk held the top of the stair the way she held everything, by refusing to let it go. The CO father had his hand raised. The photographer had his shoulder set. 300 faces were turned up toward her, and the word engagement still hung warm in the air, and it was, by every rule she had ever written, a fact now. Facts could not be argued. That was the whole architecture of her life. Junsuk stood at the edge of the room and did not clap. He had been silent when the word came. He had opened his mouth and shut it and let his mother spend his name like a coin, and the shame of that silence was sitting in him like swallowed glass. And then a service door at the back of the ballroom opened, and Han Deoksu came through it, not running, a man who never ran, and crossed the marble to Junsuk's ear and said 4 words. Cassandra came through the same door behind him. She had put the sandals back on. She had a driver's overcoat pulled over the red dress, charcoal, heavy, the fleet gray she'd worn to 100 cold mornings, buttoned to hide the silk, because a woman does not walk into 300 people mid-crisis, wearing the color that stopped the room an hour ago. Her hair was still down, her feet still remembered the concrete. She stopped at the back and let the security man deliver what she'd sent him to deliver. 2 men in the service corridors, Deoksu said against Junsuk's ear. They came up the garage ramp. They came for you. We have one. Your driver mapped the safe route and pulled a boy out of it, while I put a man on the floor. A beat. Your mother's roster is why they knew which door to open. Junsuk's eyes found Cassandra across the whole gold length of the room. And Misuk, at the top of the stair, felt the current change and did the thing she always did. She reached for control by raising her voice. Junsuk, come up. Come up and stand where? Where were the men from, Deoksu? Junsuk didn't look away from Cassandra. He said it flat, loud enough for the front rows to still. Say it so my mother hears. Deoksu turned so his voice carried. The Cho clan, gray sedan, ramp entrance, tonight. They've watched your driver for 6 weeks to learn the door. They almost had the corridor under this floor, while you toasted the year. The applause was gone now. 300 people did the arithmetic all at once, and it made a silence you could stand a glass on. Misuk's hand tightened on the rail. That is not, she started, and Cassandra watched the old woman reach for. Not the same. The phrase that had died in her throat on the staircase 2 hours before, and find it gone. Security is a matter for whom, mother? Junsok walked. He crossed the marble toward the stair, and the crowd opened for him, and he did not stop at the bottom. He came up 2 steps so he stood below her and level with the room. You wrote a roster, names beside the cars. You told me it was for the party. He let that sit. It was so you could watch the staff. Watch who touched the fleet. Watch who might be carrying something out to men in a gray car. He turned his head, found Cassandra at the back in the driver's coat. You suspected her. Mi-suk's chin came up. She would not deny it. That was the terrible strength in her. She never lied when the truth could cut. Someone in this house has been feeding the Cho for months, she said, and her voice was iron. I had a call I would not answer, because I already knew what it would ask for. I brought the staff up tonight so I could see all of them in one room and find the mouth. Her eyes went to Cassandra and did not soften. She has driven you alone more nights than anyone. She was the reasonable place to look. Then look properly, Cassandra said. It was the first thing she'd said in the room. It carried because it was quiet. She unbuttoned the top of the driver's coat, not to show the red, to breathe, and she walked forward up the aisle the crowd had made for Junsuk, and she stopped where she could see the old woman's face. You wanted the mouth, Cassandra said. You had it on your own payroll. She turned, and she found in the 3rd row back, half hidden behind a pillar, a heavy man in a brown suit with a fleet vest showing under the lapel, and a phone he'd been holding all night. Walter. Walter Osei did not run. There was nowhere in a sealed house to run to. He stood very still, and his round face went gray, and his hand closed over the phone like it could still save him. You gave me the order for the names, Cassandra said. You said it came from the family office. It didn't. Deok-su would have logged it. You wrote it yourself, so the house would build a map of the cars for you, and you handed that map to the Cho, along with the door schedule, and 6 weeks of where I go on my own time. So the men who came tonight would think a driver was their weak point instead of you. She wasn't angry. That was the thing that made the room lean in. She was reading a roster. How much did you owe them, Walter? His mouth worked. You don't, he said. It wasn't. And then the sentence had nowhere to go, and he stopped. And the stopping was the answer, the way the boy's silence had been an answer down in the dark. A woman's voice cut across the hush before anyone moved. He came to my father in October. Seo Yuna had stepped out from behind the Seo party, navy against all that gold, clutch pressed to her middle, and she was looking straight at Walter. Asking for a loan he called a bridge. My father said no. I heard the name of the men he owed. Her chin lifted a fraction. It was Cho. I've been doing that arithmetic since you walked in tonight, in a suit that doesn't fit you. She turned, not to Cassandra, but to Mi-suk, and there was no fear in it at all now. You looked at the one who never asked anyone for anything, Auntie. You never once looked at the man who was drowning in your own garage. Mi-suk's mouth opened and produced nothing. Deok-su had 2 of his men on Walter before the old admin's knees fully understood the night was over. Mi-suk watched her informant, taken through a service door, and her face did a thing Cassandra had never seen it do in 4 years. It aged. The certainty that held her upright, the architecture, took its first real crack, and it was not the jade ring against an armrest this time. It was the whole rigid line of her going 1 degree out of true. You looked at the woman who spoke back to you, Junsuk said, low, to his mother, on the stair, and you never once looked at the man who agreed with everything you said. He turned to the room then. His mother's engagement was still standing in the air, and he took it down with his hands. There is no engagement, he said it plainly, to 300 people, the way you'd correct a bill. Beside the far wall, the Seo father went stiff, and his daughter, navy, gold glasses, the clutch still in both hands, did not look stricken at all. Seo Yuna looked, for the first time all night, like a woman who could breathe. Miss Seo and I have known for a year that neither of us wanted it. I let my mother announce it anyway, tonight, in front of all of you, because it was easier than telling her no. His jaw worked. That's what I am, apparently. A man who lets the woman who drives his cars stand between him and armed men, while he stands at a wall and claps for a marriage he doesn't want. Jun-suk, Mi-suk said. It came out cracked. I told you in the car, he went on. And now he was looking at Cassandra, only at Cassandra, and the room had ceased to matter to him, that I could never want a woman like that. I said it so you'd stop looking at me. I wrote down what she said back to me, and I have carried it against my chest for 2 days, like a coward carries a thing he's ashamed to want. He reached into the smoking jacket, over the heart, and took out the phone, and he did not read it aloud. He just held it up, a small dark rectangle, so she'd know he had it on him still. I'm sorry, he said, to her, in front of everyone he'd ever needed to impress. I was a coward. You were the only person in this house tonight who did her job. Cassandra held his eyes and gave the room nothing. The Seo father crossed to his daughter through the emptying room. He had come tonight believing the marriage was a kindness done to a girl who couldn't do better. Cassandra watched the belief go out of him as he reached Yuna and saw her shoulders drop for the first time in a year. He didn't apologize. Men like him rarely learned the words, but he put his hand at his daughter's back and turned her toward the doors, away from the stair, and that was its own kind of surrender. A father steering a girl out of a room instead of into a photograph. Behind him, Mi-suk Han came down one step and then another, and she did not sweep and she did not command. She looked at her son and at the woman in the driver's coat and at the space where her informant had stood, and whatever speech she had left, she kept. Mrs. Park, at the edge of the crowd, watched her mistress descend into a party that had rearranged itself around a driver, and the housekeeper's small mouth pressed flat. 22 years, and she had known. And she had told the girl to plan it quietly, and the girl had. When Mi-suk passed her, the old woman did not lower her eyes the way she had for 2 decades. She let the jade-ringed hand go by and kept her chin level, and that small refusal was the last brick coming loose from a wall that had held a whole house upright. The garage, later. The guests were gone or going. The gray sedan had been rolled out, and the tin under the tool cabinet had given up its notebook to Deoksu's men, and the boy with the fleet vest was awake and sitting on an overturned crate with a blanket and a headache and a story he'd tell for the rest of his life. Cassandra stood at the bottom of the ramp in the driver's coat over the red dress. She'd been about to leave the way she'd meant to leave 3 hours ago, before midnight, without a coat, before this family could fit her into one more paragraph. She heard the smoking shoes on the concrete, and she didn't turn. You're indispensable, Jun-suk said behind her. You have 40 drivers. Not like that. He came around into her line of sight. The bow tie was gone, the collar open, the dragon at his throat riding the tendon as he spoke. I don't mean the wheel, Cassandra. I mean you're indispensable to me, not professionally. She turned then. She looked at him a long moment. The man who'd said in a mirror he could never want a woman like her, and had just said the opposite to 300 people, and she pulled the charcoal coat a little tighter over the silk. You saw me in red on a staircase and lost your place in a sentence, she said. That's not a hard thing to feel. Any man in that room felt it. She held the coat closed at her throat. Prove you'd want me in this coat, in the uniform I wore for 4 years, while you didn't know my name. Prove it isn't the dress. A pause. Because in January I stop wearing either. Something moved in his face. January. I'm leaving. I've been leaving for 4 years. I just finally had a date. She said it evenly, no triumph in it, because triumph would have made it his to answer. 2 vans, A courier contract. My own name over the door. I've been saving since before you learned I had a face. She let go of the coat. You want to know if you'd want me? Want me when I'm not your driver? Want me when I don't need this house for anything? That's the only version that counts. He looked at the coat, at the gray wool that had swallowed the red, at the bare intent of the woman inside it who had dragged a boy out of the dark by his collar an hour ago and hadn't once raised her voice. You mapped my house better than my own security, he said. You knew the door before the Cho did. You've been the most valuable person on this property for 4 years, and I paid you to be silent. His jaw tightened. The dress isn't what I lost my place over. The dress is just the first time you let me see you'd been there the whole time. He didn't reach for a speech after that. He'd learned, in one night, that his speeches were the cheapest thing about him. He just said, "Then let me start finding out." The morning after, the hotel drew a clean gray light through the blinds, and Cassandra Blair stood at the window in a white hotel robe, with her hair down and no red on her at all. Jun Suk sat on the edge of the bed, shirt open, the arrogance gone out of his shoulders, in a way no smoking jacket could have managed. His phone had been buzzing since 7. It buzzed again now, face up on the nightstand, and they both looked at it. "That's the 3rd meeting your office has moved this morning," Cassandra said. She hadn't touched the phone. She'd only read the screen from across the room the way she read a coolant line. 2 you canceled, 1 you didn't answer. She tied the robe. And a call from your mother at 6:40 that you let ring out. He looked at the phone and left it where it was. Your mother called at 6:40, Cassandra went on, and you're a man who answers his mother before the sun's up. You've answered her every morning of your life. I'd bet the 2 vans on it. She let that land, but this morning you let it ring, in a hotel, because I was standing at the window and you didn't want her voice in the room. Do you hear what that is? That's the first time in 36 years you chose a woman over her. No cruelty in it, just the accounting, and you chose the wrong morning to start being brave, because I'm already gone. You cleared your day for me, she said. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't soft. You who couldn't clear a sentence for me in a car 3 nights ago. She crossed to the chair where the charcoal coat lay folded over the red dress underneath, and she picked up neither. She picked up her own bag, the one with the recipe folded in the inside pocket, 3 lines and a road. You said you'd never fall for a woman like me. She turned in the doorway of the light, and she was not smiling, and she had never looked more sure of anything. Now you're sitting there silent. 3 meetings canceled, your mother wrung out, because you found out you never knew how to handle one. He opened his mouth. Nothing came. That's the answer, Cassandra said gently. Silence was your answer in the car. Silence was your answer on the staircase when I came down in red. Silence at the top of the stairs when she said the word. Engagement. And I watched your mouth open and close. She lifted one shoulder. You're consistent, at least. You go quiet at the exact moment a braver man would speak. She pulled the robe's belt tight once more. A small, final gesture, the way she'd once checked a mirror without smiling. I told you one night you'd be at my feet. I didn't mean I wanted you there. She left him the phone still buzzing, and the whole cleared day, and the silence that was the only true thing he'd ever given her. And she walked out of the room in a borrowed white robe with her own name already over a door that didn't exist yet. And by the time the elevator opened, she was doing arithmetic again. 40 days down to 39, 2 vans, 1 contract, a face that had finally stopped being invisible on a staircase, and would now, at last, belong to no one but her. Behind her, in the gray light, the boss of the Snow Wolf clan sat on the edge of a hotel bed and found, for the first time in his life, that there was nothing left to command. Cassandra Blair walked out of the building into the first morning of the year, and she did not look back at the window. If this story moved you, Stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been made invisible by someone who needed you more than they'd ever admit? When they told you what you could never be, did you let their words define you, or did you quietly decide the day they'd learn the truth? And when the moment came to walk away with your dignity intact, did you take it? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, karma, and awakening, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.